Hello, my name is Matt. Welcome to another wrestling reaction on my channel. This week it's Cultaholic Wrestling's 10 most notorious ECW matches. And if you guys don't remember the original ECW from the 90s especially, you couldn't even do it today. It would just be banned, like no one would air it. It'd have to be on some third party website channel or whatever. Well, let's get into this.
EC mother flippin' W. Apologies for the strong language, folks, but sometimes it is necessary. And it's certainly necessary when talking about Extreme Championship Wrestling, the renegade promotion that were only really around for just over half a decade, but managed to leave a strong legacy that is still felt to this day, differentiating themselves from the big two of WWE and WCW during the Monday Night Wars. ECW forged an identity with far fewer resources, relying on the creativity of mad scientist Paul Heyman, the passion of their wrestlers, and the fact that they were able to push boundaries in a way that Vince McMahon and Eric Bischoff were not. Often that took the form of matches that were
the entire Raw, Attitude Era of Raw was basically Vince borrowing, with Paulie's consent, because Paulie had a good working relationship with Vince. Paul Heyman owned ECW. It was basically ECW toned down slightly for USA cable networks.
Staggeringly violent or featured individual moments that otherwise helped to add to ECW's notoriety. The company in its truest form haven't been in operation for over 2 decades now, but thanks to the wonders of the WWE Network, fans who might have missed it can now look back and relive those memorable matches in all their glory. Well, until Peacock scrubs them from existence, that is, at which point it's back to tape trading for me. So put on your favorite black t-shirt, grab a cup of warm beer, and chant 3.
By the way, you can still get all the original ECW pay-per-views on DVD on Amazon on legit copies. So I'd recommend go buying them and avoiding the scrub versions, especially since WWE did not renew the music license, so all the hard rock and metal music that ECW was used for their wrestlers had to be scrubbed from all the matches.
3 letters with me, Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, as I take it to the extreme with the 10 most notorious ECW matches. Join us, bitches. Number 10, New Jack vs. Vic Grimes at Living Dangerously 2000. Well, if we're gonna start anywhere, it might as well be.
Important to understand about New Jack. Okay, I don't know, because you hear a lot of guys say he's okay to work with, but if he had no respect for you as a human being, like it went from being a wrestling match to an actual beating, and the guy was one of those hardcore wrestlers who didn't care about his own body health, and therefore didn't think you should care about yours.
Be with the unrelenting terror of New Jack. An impromptu match that resulted from DeBaldies interfering in a match between Balls Mahoney and Japanese superstar Kintaro Kanemura, this was the typical walking and brawling through the crowd as New Jack and Vic Grimes made their way to a conveniently placed scaffold area. Jack's death-defying scaffold dives had become an ECW staple, but he and his unfortunate foe were clearly not at ease up there, and they both fell off at the same time, with Grimes falling on top of New Jack's head in an incident now known as the Danbury Fall. It was a terrifying scene and caused serious injury to the original gangster, including brain damage and a permanent blindness in his right eye. 18 months later, the two met once again in a scaffold match at XPW Freefall, and this time Jack purposely threw his opponent beyond the tables that were there to break his fall in an attempt to hurt him because he perceived Grimes to be responsible for the result of their Living Dangerously meeting. Number 9, Cactus Jack vs.
That is New Jack's thing. If he had against you, he would just try to hurt you in the match.
Terry Funk at Hardcore Heaven 94. While ECW was known for its ultra-violence, and some of the promotion's plunder-filled matches have aged about as well as your first MySpace profile.
So these two guys, how to put it? There's some guys who hardcore matches who legitimately maul their bodies, like 2-inch deep cuts and breaking bones and stuff like that. They don't go that far. But Funk and Cactus Jack / Mick Foley, they go as far in terms of how much damage they will do to themselves and others in hardcore while still remaining on friendly terms in the match, right? As opposed to we saw New Jack, where New Jack is willing to go there and hurt people.
A few of them will stand the test of time thanks in the main to the quality of the performers involved. That can be said about Cactus Jack and Terry Funk's show-closing brawl from 1994's Hardcore Heaven. The bout was solid without being as outlandishly violent as, for example, their death matches in Japan, ending in a no contest when the Public Enemy interfered. It was in the post-match scene that the bout earned its lasting reputation, as Terry Funk called to the audience for a chair, only for a domino effect to occur as the Philadelphia throng proceeded to chuck theirs towards the ring one by one. While it was a spectacular visual and will be played on highlight reels until the end of time, it certainly wasn't safe, and one of the chairs nailed the Funker right in the back of the head, which could have been really bad. Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge ended up buried in a match.
Now, important to remember, and the Philly crowd, in general, Philly fans of anything are the worst motherfucking human beings there are. I mean, like the example in baseball, I think when some player's mother had died, and they deliberately chanted like "Your mom sucks Satan's cock in hell now" or something like that in the baseball stand audience. This is an example of type of crazy stuff, you know. Like they're just inhuman in terms of the stuff, like the foulest of the fans, so to speak, right? And the Philly crowd in ECW, which was the home crowd, was the worst, like the best of the worst, so to speak. And by best, I mean not the least worst, but the worst, who aren't in jail for committing crimes. So Funk making this call should have known what was going to happen, because other stuff like this has happened before at ECW and happened again after this.
Massive pile of them, though I suppose that's a bit better than getting the hell beaten out of you by a pissed off Bradshaw and Farouk, while Joey Styles had to abandon his post at the commentary table just to get the fans to stop. Number 8, Raven versus the Sandman at High Incident 96. The rivalry between Raven and the Sandman was already personal and taboo-breaking, given that it involved the drunken Cane Swinger's family being brainwashed by the grungy cult leader. Things escalated at 1996's High Incident show, where the Sandman retained the ECW title against Too Cold Scorpio. After the match, things got really interesting when members of Raven's Nest, including Sandman's wife Laurie and son Tyler, interfered and attacked the Sandman. Raven hit him with a Singapore cane and pile drove him through a table, as Stevie Richards and the Blue Meanie came out to assist in an angle that would rank amongst the promotion's most controversial. The cavalry tied Sandman to a giant wooden cross and adorned him with a crown made of barbed wire in a scene reminiscent of the crucifixion. The usually rabid and vocal ECW crowd was stunned into silence at the blasphemous goings-on, while Kurt Angle, who was at the show to make a cameo appearance and was weighing up his options in the business, was so outraged that he threatened to sue Paul Heyman's company if he was ever shown on their TV show. Ultimately, the angle wasn't televised, and Raven came out later and gave an apology that sounded about as sincere when my mum tells me that she's proud of my little wrestling videos on the computer. Number 7, Just Incredible versus Tommy Dreamer at Heatwave 2000. ECW had spent years shielding themselves from the threat of the Big Two, who gleefully poached their talents and pinched their ideas during the Monday Night Wars. Come 1999, however, Paul Heyman's promotion had to contend with a West Coast promotion that was looking to make a name for themselves with a very similar product. When ECW decided to run Los Angeles, California for their Heatwave pay-per-view in 2000, XPW decided to make their presence known, with owner Rob Black purchasing front row tickets for him and his crew. The XPW guys wanted to let ECW know that they were in enemy territory, and before the main event, an ECW title match between Just Incredible and Tommy Dreamer, they donned t-shirts with their logo on and began making a scene in a bid to promote their own upcoming show.
Now, very important to know, modern wrestling fans won't know this, okay? In the past, wrestling used to be very regional, and when the territories used to call them, and there literally would be like mafia style, like wars between these territories. Like if you did a show in the neighboring territory without their permission, they would literally come down to your next show with a gang of wrestlers, and there'll be big brawls. And I mean, it could have been like an organized crime TV show type of thing. But so this is a remnant of that behavior.
They weren't acknowledged on commentary. Those in attendance knew who they were, and after getting wind of the stunt, ECW security promptly ejected them from the building. And that is when the poop hit the fan, because once outside the arena, they were met by half the ECW locker room and, well, you can probably guess how it went from there. And if you can't guess and would like full details of the altercation, please call my $3 a minute ECW hotline at 1-800-69-69-ECW. Number 6, Shane Douglas versus Too Cold Scorpio in the NWA title tournament. Before they became Extreme, ECW was Eastern Championship Wrestling, and while they had something of an identity for themselves, they certainly hadn't developed the feverish cult following that would help them stand out in later years. Then ECW owner Todd Gordon was asked by the National Wrestling Alliance to produce an NWA title tournament in ECW's home base of Philadelphia in 1994. After some behind-the-scenes back and forth between Gordon, Paul Heyman, and the NWA board members, the ECW side of things hatched a plan that would not only see them publicly separate from the antiquated NWA, but would also create a lot of buzz for ECW itself. After beating Too Cold Scorpio in the tournament final, Shane Douglas threw down the once prestigious NWA title and declared that the belt meant nothing and that he didn't want to be a member of a dying organization. He then said that he was the ECW champion and that the ECW title was a real world heavyweight title. Naturally, the stuffed shirts at the NWA took a dim view of this and threatened to strip Douglas of both titles, which is when ECW was rechristened as Extreme Championship Wrestling. A credibility killer for the NWA for sure, but
So, this was big. Like this is the type of thing that literally could have got people killed behind the scenes. You know, I know it sounds crazy, but this, you know, they had Shane Douglas crap all over the NWA belt. Literally, we were all shocked when we saw it. Like, we were like, oh, what's he doing? That's the NWA belt. Oh my God, you know. And it just, ECW just took off from there in terms of the outrageousness.
A suitably punk rock start for the ascendant ECW. Number 5, Sabu versus the Sandman at House Party 98. Put Sabu and the Sandman together, add ladders, tables, and some barbed wire, and, well, you've got yourself a recipe for something that's going to be painful to watch for a number of reasons. The two battle-scarred masochists clash in the Stairway to Hell main event of House Party 1998, where the objective was to climb a ladder and retrieve a spool of barbed wire, which they could then use on their opponent. It was an awe-inspiring spectacle, with both men holding absolutely nothing back and taking some truly hellacious bumps in a bid to entertain.
And these two, I mean, these two guys are drugged out of their mind. You find out later. I mean, you know, like, the amount of damage hardcore wrestlers would do to each other, they had to be either jacked on painkillers or jacked on, like, illegal drugs. These two happened to be jacked on illegal drugs like coke and whatever, just to be able to get through this match.
It was like the sweaty, cigarette-smoking, red-headed stepchild of the later, more polished TLC matches, and the crowd went absolutely bonkers for it. After sending Sandy sailing through 2 tables at ringside, Sabu attempted to follow him out with a plancha, but cracked his jaw on the guardrail, breaking it in a sickening sight. Sabu had to stop the match and got the appropriate medical attention, while the ECW fans went home to write him some get-well-soon cards. In opposite land, no, Sabu soldiered on with manager Bill Alfonso taping his bleeding jaw shut as he and Sandman somehow finished the match. Adding to the reputation of this gorefest is Sandman taking a couple of hits of LSD, and I ain't talking about little Spike Dudley, beforehand, and working much of the match thinking Sabu was in fact a giant lizard. Number 4, Beulah McGillicuddy versus Bill Alfonso at As Good As It Gets 97. When you have New Jack, Tommy Dreamer, or Terry Funk out there in an ECW ring, you expect there to be a little bit of blood spilled. When the two competitors in a match are a female valet and a paper-thin former referee, however, you don't anticipate it will end up looking like a scene from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But when Beulah McGillicuddy and Bill Alfonso met at 1997's As Good As It Gets event, the ring canvas ended up looking like a crimson-coloured Mark Rothko original. Yes, I like art, okay, ladies, you got me. I also read books and I'm really sensitive and I'm great at cuddles, but that is besides the point because there's nothing cutesy about what Mrs. Dreamer and Fonzie did to each other that night. The bout was originally Tommy Dreamer teaming with his wife against Rob Van Dam and his manager, but the innovator of violence suffered an injury and RVD walked out, leaving the two less experienced performers out there to have a match. And what a match it was, with both giving it their absolute all and the whistleblower springing a gusher, so much so that he was hospitalized for blood loss after the fact. Later it came out that Fonzie had basically saved his job with this performance here, as Paul Heyman was ready to fire him for feeding contract information and helping to facilitate ECW wrestlers jumping to WCW. Number 3, Sabu versus Terry Funk at Born to be Wired 97. When I'm in my 50s, I reckon I'll get into fishing and maybe do a little bit of woodwork.
So there's a reason that certain people from ECW are respected by the old school fans, okay? Beulah McGillicuddy will always be in our hearts as one of the greats. When you put on a match like that, and it wasn't just Bloodfest, it was entertainingly Bloodfest, you know.
Working too. Perhaps I'll smoke a pipe and travel the world, hoping all the time that those I meet don't recognize me as that wrestling guy who had a public meltdown, self-destructed, and mysteriously vanished from public life. I can safely say that when I enter my 50s, I will not be having any barbed wire matches, unlike the crazy like a fox Terry Funk. The hardcore icon, God bless him, defended the ECW title against Sabu at 1997's Born to be Wired. It was a beautiful disaster as both men encountered the sharp stuff, which cut them up like a fine slice of beef. While the Funkers certainly took a beating in the process of dropping the title, it was Sabu that came out of it much the worse for wear after his bicep got tore open. Now, a normal, rational person might ask for the match to be stopped so he could get that looked at. But the man from Bombay, Michigan not only fought on, but fixed himself up with crazy glue in lieu of actual medical treatment. Following the match's conclusion, both men were so entangled in the strands of barbed wire that Bill Alfonso and the ring crew needed to cut them out with wire cutters. This was so grisly that Paul Heyman refused to book another barbed wire match ever again. I mean, either that or the check for Home Depot bounced and he couldn't get any more of the silver stuff anyway. I don't know. Number 2, Axel Rotten versus Ian Rotten at Hardcore Heaven 1995. I had a very vivid wrestling-related nightmare once. I was sitting in the crowd in some bingo hall in Philadelphia somewhere, and two men with the same surname were going to fight each other in some sort of death match. In this dream, the wrestlers put superglue on their fists and then proceeded to dip them into shards of broken glass. The two lunatics then...
So that's from the movie Jean-Claude Van Damme, not Bloodsport, the one right after it. We played the Kickboxer, called Kickboxer. That's from that movie.
And used their glass-covered fists to slice each other's foreheads to ribbons until both were bloody messes, and one of them was no longer able to continue. Wait, hold on a second. That wasn't a dream. That was an actual match that actually happened between Axel and Ian Rotten at the ECW Arena in 1995. Their Type A deathmatch certainly isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea, and is definitely not for the faint-hearted. It goes without saying that the bout between the two kayfabe brothers at Hardcore Heaven wasn't a technical triumph full of slick professional wrestling, but rather sanctioned barbarism that satisfied the sadistic amongst the ECW audience.
Look at the look on this dude's face. He's like, I can't believe that's actually happening. Even the ref is like, what the fuck am I reffing here? This guy is like, holy shit. I can't.
It was bloody, it was gruesome, and it was either a tremendous test of toughness and a unique novelty, or an example of the worst sort of ultra-violent nonsense, depending on which side of the broken glass-covered fence you choose to sit on. Number 1, The Gangsters versus Devon Dudley and Mass Transit. What should have been an innocuous run-of-the-mill house show match that was instantly forgotten about became one of the most infamous moments in ECW history.
This is the one with the kid.
The basic story is that the Gangsters were supposed to wrestle Devon Dudley and Axel Rotten at a non-televised house show on November 23rd, 1996. Rotten couldn't make the show, however, and the spot went to a kid named Eric Kulas, who had lied about his age, training, and experience in order to get on the show. In reality, Eric was untrained and only 17 years old. He asked New Jack to blade him during the bout, something that his opponent was only too happy to oblige with. Then, during the match, Jack cut him too deep and blood began pouring from Mass Transit's head, worrying those in the audience, including the boy's father, who had actually helped vouch for his son in order to get him booked. The bout ended with Mass Transit losing a shocking amount of the red stuff, passing out and very nearly dying as a result. Lawsuits followed for both the company and New Jack, and ECW almost lost their first pay-per-view on the back of the bad publicity. The saga dragged on for years before the ECW side were legally absolved of any wrongdoing, but the incident continues to live in infamy 25 years on.
So, yeah, that was the one I expected. There's another match with fire where they was setting someone on fire and it got out of control. But I think it was in a house show match that there was no footage of, so that no one talks too much about it. Like, we talked about it in a day because it was in the magazines, but yeah. ECW was all about pushing the boundaries, you know. Anyway, what you guys remember ECW matches? What are your favorite ones? My absolute favorite ECW match of all time is probably RVD versus Jerry Lynn. The one where like RVD jumps like 30. Cyrus says, "Oh my God, you jumped 50 feet in the audience." More like 10 feet, but that was like that one. That was great. There's one with Sandman had his USA pants on, and he did a flying leap over the rope. I think that was from the 1998. There's a lot of great matches there. Anyway, my name is Matt. This has been Unbearable 73. Another wrestling reaction. Like if you like, hit like if you like, dislike if you dislike, subscribe if you please, share if you will. I'm out of here. Have a good weekend.